So in a moment, you'll all be kind of lined up how you were before class. You'll be in Dojo Dan no Kamae here facing the mirror. You'll put all your weight in your left foot, and then you will cut here down toward the mirror. Then what you'll do is just take one, probably your left foot, turn and go back in Dojo Dan and face that wall, cut. So that's 2. Then you will go here for 3, here for 4. That way, okay? Warmed up. It's not about speed, so do your own counting. I'm not going to count for you. Exhale when you cut, inhale as you bring it back, okay? Yeah, the tachi. Tachi is a curved blade, and it postdates the chokuto, which is the straight blade. My guess is these giant battlefield swords were. My guess, and I'm not positive on this, is that the tachi would have been first, because the Chinese sword wasn't much bigger than this. So I think what happened was the smiths eventually, from what I know in old Japan, there were straight swords first, straight blade, and then the curved blade came later when they became better at smithing and metallurgy and stuff. So they would have had straight blades in Japan way, way back. Then eventually they curved. But my guess was the tachi would have been this size, not the battlefield. I think those would have been in the battlefield times of Japan. I think these would have come because you would have needed a bigger sword. But I don't think it would have been big right away. I think it would have been this size, and then they kind of got bigger as the Warring States came on. Remember, all of these evolved over hundreds of years, so it's not something we can just say, oh, it went from this to that. You know, anything that evolves is very slow to notice a difference. Let's draw that one out. So you might have had a squire on the battlefield with one of these that would help you, or you would throw the saya off and not use it at all if you're going into battle. But one of you over there grab this and pull. There you go. So look at the size of that blade. How long do you think that is? 4 or 5 feet. 7 inches. Imagine that coming at you on a battlefield. That would be very scary. But slow, right? The cut you just did, the 50 cuts. Once you swing with this, it's going to take forever to turn it again, so you better have a good target. So this would definitely be detrimental as far as speed. The tang of this probably only goes to here, because this is a cheaply made one. But for balance, the tang, you should, if you're going to get a good sword, try to get one with a tang that goes almost all the way to the end to change the balance point. This is very top heavy, and therefore it will impede my fighting even more. So yes, this is called Odachi. No dachi is another name, which means field sword. Seoe tachi, which means sword across the back, because these were so big you couldn't put that in your belt. You'd have to carry it on your back. This is still too big for a human being on their back, though. So this is an anomaly. This is kind of a freak sword. This would be, you know, on the battlefield. You're not going to carry it. Maybe a squire carried it for you. It's already out. Horse is coming. You want to cut the horse, get the guy. And then this would probably break at some point, or you drop it, then you go into your smaller sword. This one was huge. I can't imagine wielding that in battle. But think of the reach advantage for poking. Remember, the sword is primarily for stabbing, so this would be perfect for getting in the armor and finding the chink in the armor. It's much harder to slash with this thing, but I could easily see it taking off a limb. So that is a field sword. You can buy these online for, depending on where you get them. This is made in China. If you want to pass any of these around, you may, but just be careful. Made in China. So this one was only about 300 or 400, not much at all for sword. Definitely a reproduction. Here's another type. You could call this an odachi. It could also be considered a nagamaki because of the long handle. Nagamaki is long wrap handle. So this is a little bit after that one, but again, the same idea. This one is smaller, shorter. But look at the size of the handle on that. A lot for leverage. It's got the furniture of a tachi here, so it would probably be carried on a horse. Probably blade down on your obi this way. So if I was riding a horse, this would sit next to me on my left hip. And then I could draw it out on the horse. But because it's blade down, you'd have to draw it a certain way. Probably in a sideways shape over the horse, so you don't cut the ears of the horse or something. But when I pass this around, it's super light, very lightly made. And you'll feel that, again, the tang of this probably stops here. This is a cheap sword. It's not expensive, you can tell by the furniture. All of this is hollow suka handle, very poor, because that's going to snap at some point. There's nothing holding it here. This can easily break. So this is just for show. I would never use this in battle or anything, so we can pass that one around.
If you were carrying it into battle, how would you hold it? Like,
I would hold it like this. I would say, Rei-san, pull the saya off. Careful. He would pull that off, and this is how I'd go in. Just here.
okay, so it's still one at the top and one all the way at the bottom?
Yeah, now wasn't there, none of us were there in true history, but it would make no sense to have your hands here. You'd want them far out. You may want some under here so you could hit this, the opponent, but for me, it's very comfortable to have it right near the bottom. A lot of leverage here.
Yes, sir.
It would never be like this. This is ridiculous, But I would want a couple inches to hit the pommel. So this is a neat one. I don't think it's very sharp. It's quite dull. These cheap swords from China that I get, you can see the wax on it. They put wax in the saya. See the chunks of, that's wax. I don't know why they do that. It must preserve the wood, but it's terrible. You have a cheap sword and there's wax all over it. And I continue to clean them and they still get wax from the saya. So we can pass that around, but put it back. Where did it go? And then we're careful when we put this back to make sure that the blade doesn't scrape the top. Here. Okay, you can pass that around if you want.
So you said this one would be used for cavalry?
I would use this for cavalry, yes. Yep. Definitely another type of field sword. And when you're done, you can just shove it to the center. This is another nagamaki. These were started in the 1300s. They started to make these wide blades. Look at the width of the blade on this one. You see how thick that is? This is designed specifically for hacking off limbs and, again, attacking horses and things. So it's very heavy. This is a beautifully made sword. You can almost tell by the polish that this is a higher quality sword. And this was used for about 300 years in Japan. Isn't that neat? This is razor sharp. Look at the tip of that. Look at this is the boshi, and then the kasaki's the tip. Look how rounded that is. Almost looks like a machete or something, But because of the width of that and the weight of this sword, it's really good for just cutting through humans, sadly. That's what it was for. The monouchi is this part of the blade from here to here. Most cuts, they say, we weren't there, happen in the last 7 to 9 inches of any sword. This is where the killing happened. Because you wouldn't want to get close to the opponent, so this is where you'd kill someone. A lot of stuff didn't happen down here. It could, but again, I wouldn't want to hack and hit in the end. This one I'll pass around, but again, it cannot come out of the side because it's razor sharp. Okay, so I'll pass that around if you want to look at this one. And notice this. See the looseness of it? This is bad. This needs to be fixed. You have to buy a certain type of wood that doesn't, that's extremely dry, and you have to cut a small piece off and glue it in there so that it becomes tight on the collar here. So be careful because this will slide out, okay? So you might want to hold this vertically while you're looking at it. Any questions so far? None?
Seem like the Japanese are obsessed with two-handed weapons.
Yeah, very powerful.
Instead of one hand, because in China, another place that they developed shield and sword, one-handed swords.
Yes.
For
Yeah.
1,000 years.
And so did Rome and stuff.
It's
I
odd
think.
that they would only adopt two-handed weapons.
Yeah. Yeah, their armor itself was a shield. So people say, why don't you see shields in Japanese warfare? Well, I've read some stories that they considered shields to be cowardly. I don't know if that's true or not, but I never see anyone with a shield. Because the armor was so thick, that was your shield. So you didn't need an extra arm thing. And the leverage of a two-handed weapon would be more powerful rather than having one hand with a shield. I'm sure there were shields, but I don't see them. I'm sure everything existed. This is a tachi. Tachi, this was around a lot longer than, we all know the katana because we see it in movies, but this predates katana by a lot, and it was around way longer than the katana. Well, what's the difference between a tachi and a katana? Just the way it was made, the furniture that was put on it. I would think the tachi would be longer because, again, in the battlefield times, I would want a long sword. I would not want something short. So this is a tachi. You can see the grain on that one. It's not a polished finish, but it has like a grain on it, like wood. This is very sharp too. We remember the parts of the sword. Anyone remember the names? You should know a couple. You don't have to know them all. What's this called? Tsuba. T-S-U-B-A. So the Tsuba guard. What function would that have? What do you think? What's the purpose of the Tsuba? It has more than one function.
Keeps your hands from riding up on the blade.
Yes.
Protects your hands from another blade coming down.
Yeah, so it protects me from another blade, and it protects my own hands. When I was about 13 or 14, I had a ninja sword, which this didn't exist in history, but it looked like this. And I beat the sword so much I would hit objects with them that these would break off. And I used to have one without a Tsuba guard, and one day I stabbed a tree and my hands went right up the blade. A razor sharp blade went. I literally stabbed the tree and my hands went zzz, right up the blade. By the time I did this, my hands were filled with blood. And the best thing to do to stop that is literally to close your hands. It's like a tourniquet. And I ran to my mother, and we didn't go to the hospital, but it cut almost to the bone, and I had to wear tape and gauze for weeks. So I made the mistake one time of doing this. One time I was stupid as a kid. I've never cut myself except for that. All the years of drawing I've done literally hundreds of thousands of cuts. Not once have I cut myself this way. But it's not uncommon to turn the blade wrong when you're not paying attention and cut your webbing here. It's not going to kill you or anything, but it's going to leave, it's going to bleed, you're going to be like, oh, I can't believe I did that. And there are several stories of people missing thumbs or fingers because their blade went right through their thumb. So you have to be super careful with these. That the mune, the dull side, is always on your hand, never this. You will, at some point, if you have a sharp blade, do this. And I'll bet those of you with an Iaito blade have already done that, embarrassingly. There's nothing wrong with it. I'd rather have a dull blade.
Where's the actual balance point on a blade?
I think it depends on each sword. This one is about here, which is good. I'm not an expert in the balance points, but I would say that's a good spot to have it, just beyond the Tsuba guard. If it's, again, too top heavy, it's going to pull you with it, and if it's too handle heavy, you don't have the power and the leverage. So this guard has several purposes, and they were all different shapes and sizes, depending on maybe your school, your style. Why do they have a hole in them? See the hole? Does anyone know why? Anyone?
Like.
See the hole? Can I trust you to pass this around without the the saya?
Yes, sir.
When you hold the sword and you pass it, keep the blade toward the center of the circle, please, so that if it falls, it doesn't hit anyone. I don't care if it hits the mat. Don't do this. And don't pass it like this and stab your friend in the cheek. So when I pass it to Ray, remember last week? I will be like this, and I will pass it, and he will take it with his right hand and keep the blade away from his friends. He'll inspect it, and then don't turn it either. Keep it vertical the whole time it comes around. The hole would be here, obviously to make it lighter. And also they had kozuka knives, which was a little knife that the samurai had in the saya. It was embedded in the wood here. It was on this side. So picture a knife handle here about 5 inches long, 4 inches long. And what the samurai would do is they would take their thumb and take the little knife and push it through the hole. With one hand, they would just slide it up without you knowing it. They would slide this up. And the little knife, the handle would come through this hole, and then they would grab it and they would throw it like a shuriken very quickly. A bow shuriken. I don't think it'd stick in you, but it would distract you or hurt you. By the time they drew that, they would come and draw and kill you. So it was a little like primary weapon. It was awesome. It's like very James Bondish when you think about how much they paid attention to survival. So just imagine a little knife and me whipping it at Kathy. And by the time she does this, I draw and I finish. Of course, it was also used to skin deer or to cut meat, whatever, anything. But it's called a kozuka knife. I don't have any swords with a kozuka built in. I wish I did, I'd show you, but why do you think they don't make them anymore? Because there's really a lot of craftsmanship to carve a little knife inside the wood scabbard. That's a lot of work. That's hundreds of dollars of work to do that. And I haven't seen them since the 1980s. I'm sure they exist, but they're very rare. If you ever see one with a kozuka knife, get it. It's probably worth some money. Any other questions? Yeah?
About that sword, do you know what it says on the side of it?
I don't. It's probably some inscription from the company that made it. It's certainly stamped, so it's not like that's not a quality sword. It's not a good quality. But it might say Walmart in China. I don't know. I have no idea what it says on there. We could research the kanji, but I don't bother. It's probably just the maker's name. Yeah. The tachi would have been moored with the blade up or down? Down if it's on the horse. Yes.
So, Ali, I think you already said this, but on this sword right here, the handle is like super, super long. So is the reason why the handle is so long is for more like leverage?
I think it's for leverage and reach.
Okay.
And again, if you're on a horse and you're 9 feet off the ground, these won't cut it, right? Literally. These have tremendous reach. So if I was riding on a horse in the dark, I would only have to run by you like this and cut you. I wouldn't even have to swing it. I'd just leave it out and the blade would do the work. The horse would do the work. But look at the reach I can get. That's like 10 feet away. So my guess, and again, everything I'm just telling you is a guess because none of us were alive then, and half of the stuff written in history is a complete lie. Why? Because the winner of the battle writes the history. The loser doesn't get to. That's why the ninja were considered a counterculture many of the times, because they didn't get to write the history. So the ninja, some of them could have been the good guys. But just like any, look at any war. Who writes the books? The winner. Loser doesn't get to contribute. So I'm very skeptical of things I read in history, because most of it is embellished and made up. 80% of the ninja lore is made up. Why? Because I'd want to be a legend. I would want to spread rumors and make people think I'm some sort of supernatural ghost-like warrior. Who wouldn't? Then you're going to get a reputation. People will be afraid of you. And you can charge them more money for missions and stuff. So a lot of the stuff is completely embellished. And the samurai were not immune to lying about their reputations. It says Musashi won 60 or more duels. I don't believe it. He may have lost and maybe didn't mark it down. They say Musashi could have lost to a man that used a jo staff. That's quite possible. Speaking of Musashi, who developed the Niten style, the two sword, this is This is a suburi boken. Suburi is for cutting. So look at that thing. It's a hunk of wood meant to build up your muscles when you work your sword. So you know the cut you just did, you would do this in the morning and at night to condition your arms. Now this could also be a heck of a weapon, but again it's very heavy and slow. There's a battle Musashi had. Does anyone know about Musashi's battles? Where he took the oar of a boat and supposedly carved one of these out of the oar, and he fought someone and supposedly killed them with a suburi boken.
That story is funny to me because he actually showed up on time, but showed up late and spent the extra time carving it so that when he started the fight, the other person was already irritated at it.
Yeah, in the Book of Five Rings, I don't know if he mentions it, but people writing about Musashi says he used a lot of time to distract his opponents. He would show up early and late to make so that they were flustered and frustrated and angry, and they would fight angry and lose. Very smart tactic. Can you imagine going on a nice date with someone you really love and then being an hour late? You wouldn't be very happy when they showed up. Where have you been? I've been waiting an hour for you. The date's ruined. Same with a fight. I'm going to meet you at 4 o'clock after school. I don't show up till 4:45. By then the guy's so mad he doesn't even want to fight you anymore, or he throws punches wildly because he's so mad and you just beat him up. Musashi did that a lot. Sometimes they said he even would watch his own opponent. He would hide in a tree and sit there and watch his opponent get frustrated. And then he'd show up and win. So a lot of his strategy wasn't as good as he was with the sword. It was about what he did before and after the fight. But supposedly he killed someone with one of these. And he carved it, I think, longer than... He knew the length of the guy's sword and cut it 3 or 4 inches longer so that when he hit him, hit the guy right in the head. That's the one that I think happened on a beach. Because he came out of his boat, the guy was already mad. This you should get for training. You can find these anywhere. For 30 or 40 bucks. Very, very heavy. And you do 100 cuts, your arms will be like this. And then you pick up one of those, it's like nothing. So I suggest everyone gets a suburi toe. These are a great gift for Christmas or your birthday. Just ask for one or ask me to get one for you. Pass that around for sure. We use boken in class. Why? Because it's safe. So if you're going to use a boken in our particular style, get one with a guard on it. There are many styles of Aikido and stuff that do not have a suba guard. We use a guard because our sword style uses an old style which uses the guard. Don't use it without, because your fingers are going to get mauled. So get one with one of these or make one yourself. I used to have dozens of swords without these, and my teachers would yell at me. Get these, they said, so I had to buy a bunch and remake the swords. Now they all have them. Use a boken when you train. These are called shinken. Shin means what? It means heart or spirit. So a shinken is a live blade. This is a live blade that's very, very sharp. Do not use these ever when training, unless you're doing tameshigiri, which is cutting. That's a whole different thing we can talk about. But with a live blade here, I do not want to use this with a friend, ever. Unless you're like super high level. Shin, meaning this sword is alive, it's living, it's breathing, it can kill. What's the sword called that is not alive? An iai. Iai told. That is a sword that is dead, meaning it's not sharp. So this is an iai toe. It looks nice, but this is dull. Who has an iai toe here? There you go. There's a bunch of them around. This is what you should have to practice your iai toe and stuff. So this is an iai toe, dull, not going to hurt anyone, won't cut you. However, the tips on these are very sharp, so you have to have someone grind these. I think John ground that down for me.
Ground mine at the lanes too.
Yeah, grind that tip down because they all come sharp. This I'll pass around. This is a beautiful iai toe. This is from Japan. I had this custom made for me. This is about a $600 sword. Not cheap. Battle wrap here. But this is a beautiful sword. However, I don't use it much because it's not sturdy. It's like aluminum alloy. I don't think they can ship certain swords out of Japan without certain licenses, and an aluminum alloy sword they have no trouble shipping to another country. So I will pass this around, but that's a nice sword, super light. A ninja toe! Who grew up in the 1980s and 90s? You know what this is. Right? Remember? It's a ninja toe. They didn't exist. This was made up. Now, a ninja sword would have been used by the ninja, and the ninja did exist, but it would have looked like a katana, except shorter. It would have looked just like everyone else's, except the blade would be much shorter so you could draw it faster. So I always laugh when I see on the internet people say the ninja toe was real and it looked like that. Why would I announce to the world, I am a ninja going around on the street? Can you see how dumb that would be? Makes no sense. You want to match the people around you and look like them, dress like them, adopt their culture. If you're an assassin or a CIA agent and you're gathering intelligence, why would I want to look different? It makes no sense. So this was a fabrication, could have been from the Kabuki theater, but it was probably just for the movies. Sometimes I have read in scrolls and stuff that the ninja Tsuba guard was bigger, but I don't think it would have been square, but it could have been. It was cruder. And the bigger guard, they could put this in the dirt and step on it like a step ladder and climb things. So a small guard won't hold you. This you could step on and move. Again, I don't think that the blades were straight either. They would have been preferably curved. So this is a fabrication. It's cool. This is a sword that was made for the Shokosugi movies. This is the sword I fell in love with when I was about 12. This style was in all the magazines. It was about $150, and I'm like, I want that sword. It was beautiful. And this is one of the ones that I bought that it was original. But look how short that is. See, that's a quick draw sword. This is the best balanced sword I own. As far as balance, I will pass this around. See how I taped the blade? This is a Shinken, but I taped this so it's dull. I will pass this. Feel how beautifully balanced this is. The balance point's here because the tang goes right to the end. This was perfect for also hitting people with like a battering ram, so this I'll pass around.
Would the ninja have probably used a wakizashi then?
It would have probably been like a wakizashi. I think it would have looked like this, but it would have probably been short like a wakizashi, yeah. Remember the samurai had what's called a daito, which means two swords? The older samurai in the older period would have had a big tachi, and they would have had a smaller kodachi, which means like small tachi sword. Then later, and they might have had a tanto as well, a knife. This is tanto. The tanto is really old, just a short dagger. This would have been kept in the belt. And then the tanto, I think, left for a while, and it was replaced by the short sword. If you watch movies from 1600s, 1700s Japan, even 1800s, they always have a short sword like this, the wakizashi, and a katana. And if the sword furniture matched, it's called a daisho. So the swords would probably be made by the same smith. It just looked like a little brother. They'd have a small and a big one. And then the tanto kind of disappeared. So going back to the parts of the sword, any questions on the parts of the sword before we move on? If you're going to store your sword, remember we talked about that last time. If I'm going to tie the sword, sometimes they would tie the sword if they were traveling with it, so this wouldn't pop out and fall into the dirt, or if they were riding on a horse or they were running. And sometimes they would tie it for spiritual purposes. Maybe they didn't want to use their sword to kill anymore, so they would tie it. If you're going to tie your sword, here's how you do it. I don't know if you can see. You take your thumb on the guard, And the sagyo here is the cord. It goes up over here. So I'm putting it over the guard here. I don't know if you can see that. Then I wrap it this way around the suka handle twice. Then I bring it down again, always leaving my thumb there. So it's making an X across, kind of like your belt here. Then I wrap it around the saya at least twice. And then on the second wrap, I leave my thumb here, and then that allows me to create a knot here to bring the sagyo through, which is the tightening part. So this is a little crude, but you can see how it's locked now. It's not going to come out. And sometime when I'm alone with you, I'll show you how to do that with your sword one-on-one, because it's kind of hard to see from where you're sitting. But that's what it looks like. See how that's tied? So again, if I was leaving this as an heirloom and I was going to battle for my children, I would leave this tied on the rack, and they would know, Dad said don't open that. So this is a shinai. We don't use these are used in kendo. You've seen these before. Shinai bamboo sword. This is for kendo, and you can hear it. It makes a nice cool sound. Kendo is the way of the sword. It's a modern invention. It's a sport in Japan for points. It is nothing like kenjutsu, so don't think they're the same. They're very, very different. Who has seen kendo with the full gear and everything? It's fun. It's cool. I don't think there are any clubs around here. Occasionally I get a call, do you do kendo? I'm like, no, we don't do kendo. But that's a bamboo sword. We use these in class sometimes to hit because they don't hurt. The string represents the back of the sword, so if you're going to hold this, the string is the top. You can pass that around. It's a shinai. We have padded swords in our dojo, don't we? These are junk. This is my opinion. Excuse me putting my feet out. This is considered rude in Japan to show the bottom of your feet to someone. But I don't want my legs to fall asleep. We use these for the kids, and they are good for certain drills, but what happens when you use these in class? Naturally, what happens to your training? What? Sloppy. You get slap-tappy. You start to do this type of stuff like kendo, and it ruins everything. It's not really, you can't do technique. I see schools all the time that use these, and I just kind of am like, oh, what are you guys doing? These were invented in the late 1990s. It's a gimmick. These are for kids. They're great for kids, great for, youth sword battles and things because they're safe, but they have nothing to do with real swordsmanship. If I was going to get one of these to practice with, I wouldn't, but I would get at least one that's stiffer. These gray ones are stiffer. These, look how they bend. Look at that. You think that's good? It's like going to a firearm range and bringing a Nerf gun. They're going to laugh you off. What are they going to be like? What's that? I brought my Nerf gun to fire on your range. They're going to be like, son, I need to school you. But this one is stronger, so you pay more for these, but this is more realistic. If I was going to use a padded one, I use this, it's not going to bend. It still hurts more. But again, we do not use these in our dojo almost ever. Okay? And I don't mean to insult schools that do use these, but you are not doing kenjutsu. You in class use a bokken. It'll build your muscles, and it forces you to be more aware of your training partner. This, you become a romper room in about 2 minutes. Again, except with the youth we use them for certain things. Any questions yet? Yes?
What's your opinion on the polypropylene swords?
Those are fine. Does anyone have one? Where? Here. I had some on the wall. Who has a plastic sword? There's one. This. Yeah. This is plastic. These are good. They're okay. I mean, they're not like this. This is the step up. You can buy these like cold steel makes really good ones. They're super heavy, and they even mold them to look like a real sword. But these are okay. I don't mind these. They'll hurt. They really hurt. But they're not going to snap or break. So if you're going to get one, pay good money for it. Get one from like cold steel that's reputable. They might be 40 or 50 bucks, but these aren't bad. What I do like is some of them come with a scabbard. So that's kind of nice if you're training. I don't mind these at all. These are kind of cool. I do believe we have to evolve somewhat. More questions. What's this one called?
Wakizashi.
Wakizashi. Waki side means a sidearm. Also called shoto or short blade. So this one was for hundreds of years kept in the samurai as the primary sword, secondary sword, and then the katana was with it. So you'd have this with it. But this is the one that it stays with you all the time, even at bedtime. You carry this in the house. So this, in my opinion, is more important than the katana. But these are nice. So your question, could this have been a ninja sword? This would be a nice ninja toe because it's small, short. So who has one of those at home? Does anyone have one of these? Yeah, they're cool. I like them. This would have been the one you would use to commit harakiri, perhaps, or seppuku. They would use to sadly remove the heads of opponents or the top knot. But you could also use it if you need to cut meat or something, or even dig a hole. I don't know. Where's the saya for this? Here it is. What other questions do you have? None?
What was that sword called?
Which one?
The orange one. That one is for training.
This Suburi, S-U-B-U-R-I-T. Oh, Suburi to. Not burrito, but it's close. If you think burrito, you will remember this. You'll type burrito sword and Suburi to will pop up in Google. But I recommend these highly. Imagine being hit by that in the dark. That would break your shoulder. So these are some of the types. Yes?
On the wrapping on the handle, was there a particular design used by particular sword makers, or were they all the diamond shape?
I think, as far as I know, they were all the same. You do see occasional ones with what they call a battle wrap. I don't know if I have it here. Yeah, this is one. See how it's wrapped differently? This is called a battle wrap. I don't know why it's called a battle wrap. I think it's just a different style. 95 or 99% of the swords looked like this. You have the ray skin underneath it, or the shark skin here. And then you have the Ito wrap. These are very hard to wrap. You've seen the Manuki, the little designs under the wrap here. Originally, the Manuki, see these here? The little decorative thing. These were originally, way back, were meant to cover up the pegs, the Makugi pegs. The little peg here is what holds the handle. These can be disassembled. I should have disassembled one for you, but they take way too long. But the Manuki would cover up those. Later on, they became something to put your hand around. They would keep, because they bulge a little bit, they would keep your hands from sliding off. So just by having a little bit of a raise there, it keeps my hand from moving. And they had tremendous symbolism. Like Daryl asked me, this might have been the Manuki of my family, and it might have been this one's a flower. They were animals, tigers, you name it. And often they would match the furniture. Mm-hmm.
This one has dragons.
The dragons, yeah, very common is the dragon. Tiger's very common. Here's one that's probably a dragon too. They're hard to tell what they are because they're so small. But you can see that your hand goes right around it. Almost tells you where to put your hands. If you're going to clean a sword, yeah.
This is an off-topic question to what you were about to say.
Sure.
Were there any practical uses to the katanas other than war and battle?
I would have to have you give me an example of something it might have been used for.
Could they have used it as a walking stick, for example?
I think because it was your sword, you know, you've heard of the soul of the samurai. They treated this with reverence. I think that a lot of the times they had two swords. You would have an heirloom given to you by your grandfather or father that was a beautifully made sword like this one, and it would stay in your house. Then you had a battle sword that was kind of like your knife that you carry in your pocket every day. Those would have been used for anything. You could literally sit there and dig a hole with it, you know, if you had to. Or you could use it to cut meat or cut through vegetation, perhaps. I don't know. But the heirloom sword would have been treated like a member of the family. It would never be unsheathed. But I would, if I was a samurai, I would treat my sword with respect, but not to the point where I wouldn't use it if I needed it.
So most people back then wouldn't have used it even if someone invaded their house and that was the only weapon you could buy.
I don't know. I don't know of any stories of that, but probably I would. If this was my heirloom and you know it wasn't locked, I would use it to defend myself. You know. And then maybe pray later if I thought it was cursed or something. I don't know. People had all kinds of weird beliefs. What other questions? How do I clean these things? You can buy these little box kits here. They're cheap and you get what you pay for. So sometimes when you buy a sword, it comes with a cleaning kit. Inside you have your choji oil, which is a certain oil that they use to oil the swords, usually in a container like that. And then you'd have this uchiko ball here, often filled. Depending on the quality of these, sometimes they're filled with something like a talcum powder. The good quality ones would have been like a stone or a fine powder. And then if I'm cleaning a sword here, you would pre-wipe the oil off of the sword. Now I'm using paper towel because it's modern. I don't think there's anything wrong with using paper towel or a coffee filter, some sort of soft cloth. Don't use paper towel that has coloring on it or is scented, because that will rust your blade. So a regular paper towel I think is good enough. I've seen many forums where people use this. So the first thing you do is you wipe the excess oil off with a clean cloth. And you can see this is a very clean blade, but you can see all the dust on it just from sitting in the saya. I just cleaned that a few weeks ago. Your sword kit will come with this high quality like cheesecloth type paper. But if I clean the sword with it and then I re-oil it, I'm putting the same dirt back. So you want to have two separate pieces. So for this one, I'm using it to pre-wipe the sword here. Always have the blade out. Don't turn the blade this way and wipe it. It's not smart. And again, keep the tip away from people. So I'm just wiping the excess off. Then with the uchiko ball, you start at the bottom and you bang. You can see the dust coming out. They say over long periods of time this will ruin the finish. I don't know about that. I've never had that happen. Maybe they're talking over hundreds of years. You might have seen this in movies. This is how they clean the sword. See the dust on it? So that supposedly will polish it slightly. I'm going to use another piece that's clean, and then I just wipe this slowly with my hands inside the bohi as well, and I just pull it away here. If I rub back and forth, I'm going to use unnecessary excess movement, so you wouldn't do this, you know, moving away here. A couple times, you can still see it on there. Then, with the oil here, some people say you can use gun oil. I don't disagree with that. I think there's a lot of modern synthetic oils you can use that will keep it from rusting. Put a little bit on the cloth itself, and then you just wipe it lightly, a light thin layer of oil on the blade to keep it from rusting. That's it. Not a thick layer, just a thin. So that's back to normal, beautiful state. Don't ever touch the sword with your fingers. I can't tell you how many times I've done that as a kid. I'd do this just before I sheath it. Next morning there'd be rust stains the same shape as my fingers. Some of these grains, if the higher quality sword has an open grain to it, meaning it's easily corroded. So that's a nice clean sword there, see? And again, if you have a nice sword, and I'll show you one-on-one how to clean them. This is just a really quick cleaning, just so you can see how to do it. Who in here has firearms? Many of you? So you guys clean often. Same principle, you take it apart. If you're going to do a thorough cleaning, you take the makuki pins out. That's what this is for, is the little hammer that comes with it. And then you push out the pegs, and then the handle comes off. If you have a nice blade, often they'll be signed, which is called the mei, the signature. So sometimes the tang of the sword was signed. The signature would have been on the opposite side with the tachi. Katana was on the opposite side. So you can actually tell where the signature was, what period it was from, and what type of sword it was. Now in China, they still make swords and they still sign them, but that doesn't mean it's a great quality sword. You get what you pay for. If you go to a gun show and you buy a sword for $50, you're going to have a junky sword. So if you really want to invest in a good one, come and see me. I will assist you with that. I know exactly what I'm looking at. But money talks. If you go to eBay and you type in samurai katana, you're going to get a whole range, $50 sword to a $30,000 sword. If you pay $5,000 for a sword, it's going to be a good one. And you can buy old samurai swords, but they're a wreck. They're all rusted and about to fall apart. The more flawless the sword is, just like jewelry, the higher quality it is. Now they have what's called, after the Meiji period, 18-something, 76, swords became illegal to wear. The samurai class was gone. And then they wore what's called a gunto sword. A gunto sword, I don't have one, is the sword you see in World War II. It's literally a katana that the guys used in World War II. It means modern sword. And you can find those on eBay. They're still not cheap. You can find real ones from World War II. Who knows what kind of action they saw. But they were mass produced, so they're not worth a lot. And they have a very different style. They look like a tachi. So those are the gunto swords. I used to have a couple, but I sold them at some point. Any other questions? Nothing's coming to mind. All this beautiful stuff. You, yes.
This might not be a good question for now, but do you think that a sword is essentially a sharp stick?
Yes.
Yeah. Like when it was first created, it was just a sharp stick, and over time it evolved into a sword.
Yeah, the spear would have predated the sword. Would have been literally cut a branch off, sharpen the end, and run at a bear. Same with a stone. You know, those are all primary weapons, but they're still around. They still are perfect. The spear is superior to the sword in almost every way. The spear on the Japanese battlefield killed way more people than any sword. Why? Because it's longer. I can kill you from here. Why would I want to get any closer? So my sword sat there on my belt as I stabbed you with a spear or a naginata, or the bow and arrow, even better. If I can hit you from 30 yards, got him! You don't even have to get close. That's the best. It's like a text, you know? Send the text. Right? With communication. We hate to talk, don't we? You don't like to be on the phone anymore, but texting's comfortable. It's far away. It's impersonal. So yes, the spear, perfect. Yeah, and these would have been crudely made in China, Africa, India. They would have been just a stick like this. And then they would have found a hunk of iron somewhere, and they would have melted it and sharpened it, and it would have been just as crude as you can imagine. But far superior to any stick, because it wouldn't break as easily. The metallurgy in these things is incredible, how the temperature has to be perfect. They had soft steel, and then they had hard steel on the hot part, so that this was not going to chip easily. At the back was very pliable. brilliant how they had 2 different metals and everything. But it took them hundreds of years to master that. Nowadays they just make stainless steel and stuff, but the steel now is superior because we have chemistry to prove it. So some of the steels, the mahogany, and some of the steels now are vastly better than the ones from the 1400s. Just because we're smarter, we know. What other questions do you have? This is the time to ask. We don't often get to do this. Ray has something, no? I knew he did.
Are the Japanese unique?
Always feel free to move if you're getting stiff.
Are the Japanese unique, unlike the Europeans and the Chinese? And like, because I know when they made katanas, they had Buddhist priests like say prayers and do all kinds of stuff like that. But the Europeans and the Chinese, I don't think the Chinese did they? Or did they have a spiritual connection to their weapons as well?
I think it depends. If it was a Shinto shrine, they would. They would put kami spirits into the swords and everything. They would put all kinds of beliefs into them. You could only draw them at certain times, and the blade would have been blessed by the spirits of your ancestor. But again, I think it all has to do with ritual and money and stuff. I think the more wealthy you were, you could have better swords made. If your temple was larger, you could have swords made for your temple and stuff.
Did they really cut people in half to test the blade?
Yes. It's a gross thing, but some swords had marks on them. And that would show them how many bodies you could cut through. These were the ultimate weapon, in my opinion. I've never seen a sword finer than this in the history of the world. People argue German swords better. No, I've never seen a sword as superior as this. And yes, they might have marked the sword. Now, often they would take criminals and they would use the blade on the criminals to see how sharp it was. But there were cases where they would hack cadavers. They would stack them and see how many could go through. It's gross. Barbaric when you think about it. But that's what happened. And it doesn't matter. European culture was just as barbaric. The Dark Ages themselves, everything. American history is the same. We all have a terrible past. When you think about it, you may disagree. I could argue for hours on this. We are living in the most peaceful time ever in humankind history. We really are. Even though we have wars on occasion, we are living in a war. Can you imagine living 300 years ago? I would be long dead. I wouldn't live past 40. We are so lucky to live where we are in this century. Really, the whole world. Violence is actually going way down compared to where it used to be in most countries. Not all. There's always going to be exceptions. Can you imagine living in Japan with these around and the whole class carried them and you bump into the sword on the street and the guy says, "Take your sword out to the death now." You would be so mindful. They were so polite with etiquette because they knew they could be killed at any moment. Yet they didn't have the freedom we have, so I would never want to live at that time. People always ask, "Mr. Norcross, when you want to live then?" I said, "Yeah, for about a week. Then I'd want to come back to cable and a hot shower and electricity and food that I'm not going to be poisoned and fresh water. Why would I want to live back then? Barbaric times. It'd be nice to visit like Westworld, you know, but I wouldn't want to stay there." What other questions? These are all great. All great.
Sharpening with just a whetstone?
Yeah, there's a whole thing on how to sharpen these. They'd start with big stones and work down. I just saw something. The master swords in Japan, which they still make, you need a license to make swords, and it takes like 5-10 years as an apprentice. They can take a month to sharpen the sword every day. And they start with the crude metal and they polish it, but they get it all the way down to a fine grit on the tip of the thumb of the master, literally called a master sharpener, and he would do this for hours and hours each day until it became a mirror polish. Well, it's like a slave labor, you know, but a labor of love. So it could take weeks to make a sword and weeks to polish it. I mean, I'm talking months to make a good one. And you could still buy them. I could go online right now and order a sword from Japan that would take months, but it's probably 20 to 40,000 bucks. I'm not going to pay that for a sword. We had mortgages. What else? Good question. But I don't think it was like ground in a stone. I think the stone was carried to the blade.
So for the ones that you cut through tatami mats on, do you resharpen yours? Or?
I don't know how.
Okay.
I don't know how. I'm not saying like a cheap sword, you couldn't literally take a knife sharpener and make it sharper, or a file, fine file systems. A lot of files are good, but I don't think you can beat a whetstone, but I've never done it. There are people around, I'm sure, that could sharpen a sword for a good amount of money, but they would, I'll bet right in Cincinnati there's probably a couple that could sharpen it for you, that would know what they're doing. I don't know enough. And often the blades you buy are not quite as sharp as you can get them.
What's the etiquette on displaying a sword like that?
We did that last week.
Without the...
Oh, without. This would be it. Yeah, you don't wouldn't want to put the blade this way. Is that what you meant without the saya?
Is it proper to display it like that?
Yes, I've seen it done. If you're going to have people over, you know, if it's a big event, we wouldn't do it here. But in museums, if it's on display for a week in Cincinnati, they'll have the swords out. They're not going to hurt them. But they would be in controlled conditions, very little humidity. Because I wouldn't leave this out like today when it's raining. It will rust. But yeah, just like that. And then they would probably have the saya underneath. Yeah. Blade up, yeah. And they would have the lighting so you can see the hamon, which is the cloud line. This is the hamon. Look how beautiful that is. That's done by hand, you can tell. That's not a machine. Someone took the time to put the clay by hand before they baked it. What else? Good questions. I love these. There.
Is there a certain way to do a simple kaiten with a sword front roll?
Yes, don't stab yourself. Typically, when I'm rolling with a sword, I take it out of my belt and I put it behind me as I roll. Probably blade out, like we did last week. So if I was going to roll my left shoulder, my left hand, I would roll this way out my arm. And then if I'm a righty, I'd probably hold it here with the thumb, and I would roll on my right shoulder. But I would want the sword behind me as I roll. But there are cases where I'll back roll, I'll roll on my left shoulder and my right sword it'll be out on the ground on the right. And then there's an old video of me doing rolling with a sword. It's got to be 5 years old now. You can find it somewhere on YouTube, one of our older videos. And I'm rolling around on the ground drawing the sword as I'm rolling. So if you look that up, you will find it on our channel. But it's just practice. You wouldn't want it out of the saya. And I wouldn't want to roll it where this is near me. I would keep it away.
So you wouldn't keep it on your obi?
I would never keep it on my obi, no, because it's going to hurt your back. Yeah, you want to take it out. It's possible, I'm sure, but I wouldn't roll it on my obi. Yes.
So what you said earlier about the hamon, what's it called again?
Hamon, correct.
Yeah, the hamon.
Called cloud line.
Yeah, the cloud line. So how is that created? You said they put clay on there?
Yes, I'm not a metallurgist, but the swordsmith, when it's baked and stuff, they by hand they put a clay or something on there, which keeps this part cooler, I think. Keeps it cooler. And therefore it changes the chemistry of the blade. It also makes this part harder, more brittle. And this part without that on it becomes softer, because you want the edge to hold the edge. So if you have a poor steel, it'll chip easily. So with the clay baking on there, it makes it harder. I think it's something like that. Again, I'm not an expert. Yes.
I've actually seen a really nice chart of a cross-section of katana and all the different methods
The
of
layers.
steel folding.
Yeah. There's many good documentaries you can watch on the sword forging process. It's incredible. It takes weeks to make one sword. I'm not that into the making of the sword, but I've seen enough on it to know what it is. Does anyone have one of these short wakizashi? These are fun to have too, if you're doing doubles. There was something called Niten no Ryo, which Musashi used, which was two swords, one in each hand, one-handed. He had a short sword and his long, and he would fight like this. This is a really difficult way to defend against. Someone has two of these out, you're in trouble, because you fight this one and that comes out of nowhere. So Musashi used these in several battles, supposedly. Read the Book of Five Rings. He has many stories about the Niten style he developed. Matthias, Matthias, who just got back from Japan, he studied that with a teacher in Kentucky for a couple weeks or months. What else?
You mentioned a tang. What exactly is that?
That's the part under the suka, the handle. I don't have it to show you. The tang is the metal strip here.
Okay.
It's not finished. It's the bottom part of the sword that's incomplete. And that would have the signature of the sword maker, but it would just be a hunk of metal, and it's often rusted looking. It's dark. It's not polished. It's really crude looking. It's like the barrel of a gun.
If I can add, be careful about any sword you buy. They make the thing called a rat tail on all these swords. You buy the sword,
Yeah.
and they'll say, "Oh, full tang," right? And then you rip it apart, you get home, and you take it apart, and it is full, goes all the way up, but it's just this little bitty metal
Like a
thing,
rat tail.
like a rat tail that goes all the way down to the bottom of the handle, and it will snap if you hit a tree or anything. And I've had it happen, and it flies off to nowhere.
Yeah, a decent sword tang will be as thick as the blade, and it will be hefty. The rat tail one tapers. It starts thick and it gets thinner and thinner and thinner like a spike, and it looks like a nail. And like Ray said, that will snap like nothing. So avoid rat tail swords. But how would you know? You have to take the handle off and look. Anything else?
To add to what Ray was saying, beware of stub tang.
What's that?
It's where the metal right here is the end of the blade.
That's
The
even
tang.
worse, yeah. Total junk. Total junk. You can tell by the weight, I think. If you pick a sword up, the handle's super light. There's something wrong there.
I tap the very end of the hill with my hand and listen to vibration.
You can listen, yeah. There's ways of doing that. Are you bored?
No, sir.
I mean, I could go on and on, so any other questions? And I don't know what to talk to you about until a question brings it out, What other type of swords do you guys, does anyone have any claymores or anything at home that's different, like a European style? What do you have?
I have claymores, short swords, bastard swords,
Nice.
krises, scimitars.
Do you have a favorite? Or do you like them all?
I really like my Irish bastard sword.
Why? What is it? The weight? The feel of it?
It just feels right to hold. It doesn't feel like I'm holding a sword. It just feels like I'm holding an extension of myself.
Yeah, you want a sword that's fitted to you. So if you're tall, you'd probably have a larger sword. Smaller, like again, I always use Lord of the Rings. If you're Frodo, you want Sting. Or Bilbo, you don't want Glamdring or something. You're gonna fall. So again, even though I'm a big person, this is the best feeling sword I own. But it's the most fake of them all as far as reality based. But in battle, I would bring that over all of these. I think it's a heck of a good steel. Large guard, keep me protected. Long handle, good for cutting power, and it can stab very quickly. Is that it? I'm missing a lot.
I thought of one more question. If you were to go into a battle, you said you would take that sword over all others. What about the spear? Would you take a spear over that?
Can someone get the Yari spear there? The red. Sir, Jumonji Yari. I got told. Yes, this is far superior. There are tons of styles of spears. This is a Jumonji Yari. It's got the cross shape. Might be another name for it. So if you miss with the tip, you have, and I tape these because they're sharp. These are sharpened too. So if I miss you with the point, these are going to hook you like a kama and stab you and hold you and get stuck in your gi and whatever. Way superior to a sword. Unless the shaft got cut, then you better know Hanbo Jutsu or Jo staff. This is a very cheap spear I bought from China, and it's completely hollow. It's top heavy, meaning there's nothing here. There's no tang. A good spear tang would go to here. This stops right there. It's cheap. Vastly superior. And most of them didn't have this on them, they're just straight. And some of them had a shape where it was thick, like a diamond, because the thicker the blade, the more blood damage it would do. I know that's gross, but if this had 4 sides to it, when you got stabbed, you couldn't cauterize the wound. You couldn't stop it from bleeding.
Have you seen the knives where it's like a spiral?
I have.
Like the diamond and it's a spiral?
They're meant to kill you, yeah. Same principle. The more design of the blade, the more damage it's going to do. It's like a hollow pointed bullet. It's going to expand and you're not going to recover from it. I don't think a lot of people died from their initial wounds. I think they bled to death later. Yeah, I think that was more common. Probably in war too. Yeah, Yari is very superior.
I was also wondering, if that broke in half, like perfectly in half or near close, would you take the edge that has the blade on it?
Yes. This comes unscrewed. Why does it come unscrewed? They can't ship it that tall, that's all. It's all cheaply made. You could probably make this at home if you were Norm Abrams or someone. Yeah, I would take this half for sure because I could stab hit. This is just a junk. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead. Anyone that has to leave, go ahead. I don't know what time this class ends.
7:15. 7:15.
My God. You guys, you gotta tell me if you have to leave and stuff. See, you have people. I apologize. Again, I can go on and on and on and on.